I've always been interested in the big question since I was a kid. Literally, what is the nature of reality? What are the limits of human potential? I was really just thinking, gosh, we've got to get this money thing sorted. I'm not going to spend the rest of my life stressing about this thing because I want to get back to understanding what's going on down here.
And I don't know anyone like you that is not only just an amazing tech entrepreneur, but a philosopher. The problem that you were solving was people were waiting for long lines for shuttles.
We were the first to beam the location of public transit buses and trains to the internet so that the administrators and the public knew where they were. The funny thing about being an entrepreneur doing something innovative is that people around you say, if it's a good idea, why isn't somebody doing it? I had to start taking meetings like within view of a window so that I could say 3, 2, 1 and point out the window and that bus would go by.
What's the relationship and the nature of intelligence and consciousness?
People do not agree on what consciousness is right now. So whether the machine is conscious or not is going to be a perennial debate for a long, long time. The conclusion I've come to is that...
Hi, this is JP Newman on Investing on Purpose, and here today we have Josh Whiton with us. Josh is a dear friend. I've been wanting to have you on this show for quite some time. Now that you are in Austin, I nabbed you before you left again. Josh, what I'm really excited about with this episode is I've known you now for about 4 years, and I don't know anyone like you that is not only just an amazing tech entrepreneur, a computer scientist, but a philosopher, a deep thinker of all things. And really with whatever you touch, whether it was your startup company to MakeSoil, to now becoming the leading advocate on AI and mindfulness, you're always thinking about the same question: how do I improve the earth with my actions and what I'm doing? And very few entrepreneurs, I think, really have like your skill and think like a scientist, but then also think like a philosopher. It's a really left brain, right brain skill that I don't see too often. And you were just telling me that, because I kind of assumed, like we mentioned, a lot of people's stories who I've interviewed on my podcast, it's a story where they kind of had to hit like rock bottom to become that good person. Even for me, at Thrive, it took me feeling safe around money to really start to stretch into purpose. Like I wasn't like this purposeful guy, just the opposite. I was in survival mode and I had to get out of survival mode. But it sounds like, Josh, for you, you were born this way. Like you've been born to really think about like complex problems and how to solve them. So that's unique. And I'd love to just kind of like, if we can, just jump in and welcome you and tell me like, where does that come from? It's pretty unique.
Glad to be here, JP. This is going to be fun and
super fun.
Where does it come from is a big question. At this point, I think the past lives and all that is probably a real thing because I just see so many like peculiar personality differences that people come in with. But for me, I've always been interested in the big question since I was a kid. Like what is the nature of reality? What are the limits of human potential? And then I just noticed that people didn't have the time to ask those questions because they were financially strapped. They were preoccupied with money, right? And I watched my very hardworking parents spend most of their time trying to provide. And so I had a bit of an entrepreneurial brain as a child, but I was really just thinking, gosh, we've got to get this money thing sorted. I'm not going to spend the rest of my life stressing about this thing because I want to get back to understanding what's going on down here and to really be able to follow my curiosity almost every day.
It's almost like, let's just get this money thing taken care of. Let's just do this.
Yeah.
Get out of the way.
And
so
I'm almost a little envious of people who are like more into money. Like they like it. It's like a score in a video game or something. Like they want to keep getting the number higher. Like my journals are full of essays about me trying to convince myself that money is worth pursuing because it gives you freedom. But I had to really psych myself up about it because otherwise I just can't be bothered with it.
That's, you told me, Josh, I remember in some past conversations, you were telling me like, even as a kid, you really were kind of like beating to your own drum. You weren't the normal kid. You were really kind of like, we had a conversation about this a couple of years ago. Like it was hard for you because you were different from the time you started out. And it's almost like you had this wise soul.
Not go over well with the other kids.
No, right? You told me it was pretty hard.
Yeah, for sure. Terrible. Yeah.
So you're almost like, let's just get this money thing out of the way, like so I can do all the cool stuff I need to in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember I was being interviewed for a business magazine once, and they were asking about entrepreneurship and why. And there's a couple of reasons why. Like, first of all, if you're this kind of polymath, high achiever brain kind of person, you're going to find probably a lot of challenge being in another person's organization, having these structured roles that you kind of outgrow so quickly. But for those entrepreneurs listening, like, you know that the role can always absorb as much of you as you can possibly muster to bring to it, right? So it's kind of like a role with no ceiling. So that kind of made sense. But I remember the woman saying, like, why? And I was like, well, first of all, my mind just solves problems wherever I look. Like if I just rest my attention on it, my brain starts trying to come up with a solution. But secondly, I was just like, I just wanted to making a living. I wanted to get making a living over with so I could get back to understanding the fundamental nature of reality. And I remember I was like writing an email or something while I was doing this interview, and she was just silence on the phone. And I was just like, wait, did I just say something weird? And she goes, well, I've never gotten that answer before, And I get these little feedbacks that, like, these are not normal things to say.
Josh, I was just thinking, and then we're going to go back to this. I introduced you to a very close friend of mine, Tristan Truscott, who's been on the podcast. And I said to Tristan, pay attention to Josh. There's very few people that I know. I almost see you in my mind as I almost want to say like the Leonardo da Vinci of our time. And I mean that in a really like complimentary way, where I've just never seen, it's very rare you see people with such a left brain, right brain be able to go from like the most increment details of technology to the biggest problems and the biggest thoughts about humanity and where we're going to go. And then with the heart. So it's like having the heart and the brain so synced. And I know for you, sometimes it's probably frustrating, because I think if you could, you'd be in your magical lab every single day. And I know you already have some quiet projects we can't talk about that are truly life-changing, because that's just kind of how you're wired to do that. And I just think, I don't know very few people, if any, that kind of, you just are really special that way.
Yeah, thank you.
And I actually think that it's come to me, and I know it, that you really are, as humanity goes through its challenges, whether they're environmental challenges, political challenges. We talk about tech, which I know we're going to talk about later. You're one of the few people we need here to help solve those problems. That's really clear to me. Which was why I was bugging you last week and urging you not to just hang out in were you in Bali?
I was in Thailand.
In Thailand. I'm glad you're in Thailand. I know you're comfortable, but get your ass out here. We need you.
Thank you.
Right?
Yeah. It's good to be back in Western civilization. And I know I have some further role to play in this whole thing. And my brain, I think, really works in a peculiar way. And at the same time, I really appreciate how other people's brains work as well. I know people who, they have a certain artistry to them. And once they found the one thing they were good at, they just doubled down on it and they've never looked back. And I can even be there. Sometimes I'm really envious of that, because I'm just like, what do you do with, in a world where everybody wants you to niche down and be a particular thing? And I'm just like,
you are so flowy in such a good way.
So I am what I am. I don't really wish it on anybody, but I think it can be of some use to the world.
I think you are of use, and I think it's going to get bigger and bigger. Okay, let's just talk about money and get that out of the way so we can talk about the good stuff. How did you go from college, computer science, obviously your transportation company, which helped, if I remember, TransLoc, am I saying it right? TransLoc, which was really helping way before they were talking about autonomous vehicles. You were working on autonomous buses, if I remember, hospital systems and universities, if I recollect.
Yeah, mostly transit systems, starting with universities and then municipal transit systems.
And you were doing this a long time, way before, this was
before smartphones, before it was really before people even knew what to do with GPS, which is unthinkable now.
Yeah.
But it was back when it was primarily seen as a military technology. All the public knew about GPS is that it helped missiles go where they're going to go with more accuracy than ever. So all they saw were these terrible footage on TV of missiles going into terrorist bunkers or whatever. So I was so early with this that I had to, when we were...
Was this right? Like, how old were you, by the way? Was this right?
22.
Oh my gosh. Like right out of college.
Yeah. I was still in college because I thought I'd had such a bad school experience. I thought it was just such nonsense that I had no intentions of even going to college. I was just like, why would I ever go to school again? This is, my life began when I got out of school, and I was just like, forget that. I'm going to do whatever I want. And then little by little, I learned that college could be very different than high school and middle school, but nobody was pitching me on it. So I was still in university, and this was so early with that technology that when went to pitch customers about putting GPS on the buses or trains in a transit system.
Which, by the way, was a super big deal. Because the problem, the problem that you were solving was people were waiting for long lines for shuttles around campuses, shuttles around hospitals. And because they weren't on like a very tight synced program, people would be waiting like a long time, traffic, wait times. And so what you really solved is by using, if I remember, by using the GPS, you were able to like lock these on more like a trains that ran on time.
Yeah, we were the first to beam the location of these massively expensive assets of public transit buses and trains to the internet so that the administrators and the public knew where they were. And so if you think about it, there were, the funny thing about being an entrepreneur doing something innovative is that the people around you say defeatist stuff like, if it's a good idea, why isn't somebody doing it? There's kind of like these entrepreneurial kryptonite statements that are just total BS, right? If it was a good idea, why wouldn't somebody be doing it? Because most things in the world I think don't make sense. They quickly outgrow whatever the original intention was. They get crusty. They fail to update as quickly as reality. So I think you look around, like if you have a hunch that something in the world is not working well, you're probably right. Because I think few things in the world work well. And in this case, I would have to give myself these pep talks where I would just come home and look in the mirror, maybe after a hard day of not being understood, in some sales pitch or something, and just say, okay, right now, nobody knows where anything is. And if people knew where stuff was, that'd be better, right? I'd have to look in the mirror and be like, people don't know where things are, and I can make it so they do know where things are. I'd have to go back to this fundamental value proposition to even keep myself in the game, right? Because transit administrators who are not known to be forward-thinking.
Really? They're not innovators?
You don't get into running bus companies because you're, thinking of sci-fi stuff. They would literally say to me, if we put this GPS on the bus, will a missile hit this bus?
That is awesome.
And it sounds so laughable now, but there were no GPS and smartphones yet. There were no smartphones. Like these seemed like legitimate questions back then, right? But that's how early we're talking. And so one side effect of having a brain like this, and I know some of your listeners can relate, is that you're quite often like 5 years ahead of the market.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a product, I just was thinking about it during the early days of the internet, and it was just aggregated online bridal registry. And I would call in sick to Sony, and I'd fly to New York for the day, and I'd get this in front of Macy's and all these top people about, I'd actually carry with me the old heavy 50-pound screens before they were flat screens. And I'd carry it in a taxi cab and I'd make my pitch about online bridal registry. And I couldn't get past the conversation of people saying, no one's ever going to buy things on the internet. It's unsafe and we'll never get past the safety issues. I couldn't even get to the online bridal registry part because they just couldn't understand the concept that like online was going to become the thing. And I saw it so early. So I understand that being misunderstood. And
my first company when I was 16 or something, nobody would give us a credit card terminal. Like, you remember back when that was like a big deal? You had to it was like getting a loan from a bank almost.
Oh yeah.
And like we had to use my buddy's dad's dentist office, credit card machine surreptitiously or something like you weren't even allowed to process payments back in the day, right? It was insane. So
let me ask you a question. What gave you, also let me ask you a question on the buses. Was it about syncing the timing of when the driver would go, or was it actually? I forget. Was it autonomous? Were they self-driving, or was it just helping
No. Self-driving would be super too far away.
Right. So it was just helping the driver sync timing properly.
It was so that the other drivers, the riders, and the people running the system knew where the vehicle was.
Oh, okay. They could open.
It was going from the Stone Age to not the Stone Age. It was really not that crazy of a proposition. But back then, nobody had ever seen a real-time transmission of a moving vehicle on the internet. It had never happened before.
Wow.
There was almost nothing in a web browser that was moving, and cellular data was almost not a thing. So this was back when people were buying 50 or 100 SMS text messages a month as a data package. Remember that kind of stuff?
I do.
So we pushed all of these technologies to the limit in a way they'd never been pushed before. And it was so unthinkable that I had to start taking meetings within view of a window, so that when on the screen we were showing this representation of the bus on the map moving towards us, I could say 3, 2, 1 and point out the window, and that bus would go by.
People would be like, magic.
Freaked out. But that right there is what gave a company with 4 22-year-olds and no office a chance against the incumbents at the time who just couldn't do the magic that we were doing. We didn't have anything going for us except the cutting edge technology. We had no history, no track record. We hadn't graduated yet, but we were able to do, I knew that if I was able to get the technology to this point, it would be the credibility that we needed. And so we were able to bootstrap the company.
It's incredible. How did you get from there to get, if I remember, it was Ford who bought, wasn't it Ford who bought the technology? How did you get from 4 guys, 22 years old, to getting a large automaker like Ford to come in, trust you guys, and pay you? I know I won't say, I don't know if you want to talk about your numbers or not, but they paid you a pretty handsome price for your company.
Yeah.
How'd you do that?
That's once the prototype is built, once the first customers are secured, which is, early sales are always personal and early sales are always part of your product development. So for instance, I got into it because I just wanted the riders to know where the buses were. Because my perspective was of a rider waiting for the bus to get to my class. And
is that where it started from?
I literally would be waiting at the bus stop, having no idea where this thing was. And I just finished playing video games in my apartment where everything was being tracked online. The bullets, the Jeeps, the players in this video game. And I'd run outside, and just after a couple of cycles of that, I was just like, wow, the most cutting edge technology in the world is being used for entertainment. And not even a sliver of that technology is being used in civic infrastructure.
Wow.
And I could just see this huge disparity, right? And I was like, if I can just bring an ounce of the latest technology to this completely antiquated industry.
It's amazing.
And then when you think about it, if you know down to the second when a bus is arriving at a bus stop, you unlock so many abilities. You can now actually come up with a real timetable instead of a made up guessed timetable, which is what they came up with. We had transit agencies where they would have a bus that was like late 80% of the time. And they were browbeating the driver to do better and this and that. And we'd show them that, sure, the bus could never get there at 5:33, but it was always getting there at 5:36.
Right.
Guess what? Change the schedule, right? It was just like, there was no end to the efficiencies going from not knowing where things were to knowing down to the second where things were. And that's something that even I didn't foresee. I just knew that it had to be better once you went from total ignorance to almost total omniscience about where the assets were. And that's kind of the fun of the entrepreneurial journey is, hopefully your hunch is right, or with a couple pivots, it finds its mark, but you're still going to, working with customers, unlock possibilities you had no idea were even there.
It's incredible. So Ford came in, it sounds like you had a success at a really young age. I mean, that's young to kind of have your first, 25, 26 when you sold a Ford?
No, it was much later, but I would say before that, I had financial independence just because the company was profitable.
It's amazing.
Yeah, I was able to replace myself as CEO and kind of get back to the things that excited me more.
It's cool. Well, I know that a lot of people in their 20s, when they make money, crash and burn. That most of my people who I've interviewed have crashed and burned because they had too much money too early and they didn't know what to do with it. I'm guessing with you might have a different story. So when you finally were able to leave your company, you had some money behind you, where you're like, I want to get back to what I said when I was 14. Or like, what did you do from that point?
Well, strangely, at that point, I had become simultaneously really enamored with the food system and understanding that it was hurting the public, the standard, ordinary industrial food system. So I became obsessed with gardening and growing food and going from planting seeds to how do you nourish it in the most ecologically sensitive way. Like I realized that the food system was bad for people and it was bad for the planet. And I couldn't unsee it once I saw that. And since the transit tech company was already improving public transit all over the country and in other countries even, I just saw this overlooked problem of the food system, which we know is still a hot topic today, right? It's 15 years later.
Hotter than ever.
It's hotter than ever. And in some ways it's still more messed up than ever.
It is.
And in other ways there's more awareness than ever. But it's one of those things that can get like better and worse at the same time. And so I just had more time to throw myself at that. So I started traveling the world, studying local food systems all over the world. Then I started a community garden to share the experience with my neighbors and to teach them. Then I started an urban farm to take over an acre of downtown Raleigh where I was living. And that's still thriving today as a thriving urban farm. But that was one of the first urban
Wow.
farms in
Amazing.
the Southeast. And so I also bought one of the first electric cars. I believed in, electric vehicle transportation. I was tracking Tesla since 2003 and watched it go through many failures and reboots. And so
I remember you invested in Tesla early too.
And in the IPO. And I didn't have a single friend who thought that was a good idea.
Yeah.
Not a single friend. And so if you think about it, like I'm in this North Carolina town. I'm driving an electric vehicle it looks like a Ferrari or something, right? It looks like a little Porsche, and it makes no sound, and that's freaking people out. Like, why isn't this muscle car making sound? And I'm driving it to
This is the original Roadster.
The original Roadster, and I'm driving it with like shovels and compost in the trunk to my urban farm in the middle of the city, which people also think is a crazy idea. Like, why would you grow food in the middle of a city when you could get cheap farmland somewhere else? And all the buses surrounding the urban farm were being tracked by my tech company. And so it's really, if you look at the pattern, it's really having insights, solving problems, and then being motivated by those ideas and solutions to do something, especially to improve civilization. And then when I wasn't doing that, I was traveling the world studying the nature of consciousness itself. Like, what are we? Why are our perceptions this way? All that stuff.
Yeah. You said something, insights, and we all have various levels of insights, but it's one thing to have an insight. For most people, I feel like you're kind of parodying. You hear information, you make an opinion or an informed decision on that opinion, and that's your insight, which is like, I heard this on a news channel, I heard this from a friend, I believe this, and we get deep conviction beyond those beliefs. But that's different than insight, because what I see you do quite often is you actually see a problem from a different angle than the way most people see it. And then once you see the problem, a lot of people can then see a problem, but then to actually have a unique way to act on the problem, which, by the way, is going to be the most important thing. We'll talk about this as AI comes, is that ability to figure out where you fit in the model of how, as a human, you can actually like affect the problem.
And the more domains you've absorbed, the easier it is to come up with solutions.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, a problem with the industrial education system that has become the norm in the past, 80 or so years, is that maybe our minds are more naturally omnivorous. And if there weren't all these categories, we'd just go around learning things. But instead, you go to university and they say, which one of these narrow majors do you want to be a part of? And so people really, I think we know now that a lot of the traditional schooling system destroys the curiosity of young children, sitting there for hours every day, ignoring what your body is telling you, bored because you don't know what the material is good for.
Being taught to memorize and regurgitate, and that's how you get rewarded.
Exactly.
Right.
And then 14 years of that, and then everybody's surprised that these people aren't creative and able to think outside of the box, right? And it's like, well, what did you expect, right? So for better or worse, I think my mind rejected that mentality.
Right.
And I sort of just sat there catatonic for most of my schooling and just waited for the day to be over. And then went home and read encyclopedias because I thought that was more interesting. So people couldn't tell if I was an idiot or a genius. They had no idea. They're like, the teachers were split, and they mostly just figured
They put you on medication now.
They suggested it.
Josh, let's talk a little bit about MakeSoil. I'm really amazed. And this is actually how we met years ago. So you basically had that fascination with food, the earth, and I think you realized that we are damaging our soils here on earth. I hate to be the Debbie Downer, but the rate at which we're damaging our soil, turning them in from nutrient-rich soil with big pharma and the way our farming practices across the world are just decimating our soils, where they're becoming deserts. They can the food has very low nutrient in it, if any, hard to grow, and we don't know what's happening. And then we have this waste problem over here, where we keep throwing things away, except there is no away, right? Which means we just keep stuff in landfills.
And the exact stuff we're throwing away, the organic matter that half of landfills are made up of, is the exact stuff that's missing from the farms and the fields, the soil.
So here we are, we're burying our trash that is nutrient rich that could be really helping our soils, and we're depleting our soils at the same time, so that we're making food that you could be eating your apple, you can be eating your friend. It's so nutrient light.
So instead of no problem, we have two problems that we're creating simultaneously.
Yeah,
more than two problems.
So tell us, just to walk us through MakeSoil. Obviously, when we talk about the four dimensions of wealth, I talk a lot about purpose wealth and a lot about community wealth. I feel like MakeSoil hits a lot of things, but it really hits like a deep purpose of solving this problem, which is your theme, but then solving it through community, not putting it on one person. We're always looking to our government to solve a problem, capitalism, corporations, and you're like, no, this can be solved through communities. Can you just tell us more about MakeSoil and like your model?
Yeah. Even though the intervention is about regenerating soil through diverting our food scraps from the landfills and back into the earth, I think the problem I was really setting out to solve was that we know people are living out of harmony with the earth. Most of civilization is. We hear it so much that most people have given up on doing anything about it because it's just like too painful to think about every day. We're so off course, and we're making so little headway on it after so many attempts. And so I thought, okay, what is our best shot of actually harmonizing humans with nature? And why is it not happening more? And one of the reasons is that people aren't having any regenerative experiences in their daily lives. Like there's none to be had. Like putting a aluminum can in a recycling bin is not regenerative. It's like hopefully a step in the right direction if it makes it to the right place. But it's not regenerative, and it's not inspiring, and it's not really harmonizing anybody with nature. And so I realized that this opportunity to solve the organic waste problem, if it was experiential, then it could be something that brings people into harmony with the earth. And I just saw that. I saw that in my experiments with the community garden, with the urban farm, that there were these almost cliche experiences that people knew about, like showing up to harvest a tomato and getting their selfie on Instagram, but then kind of just going back to their normal lives, mm-hmm. right? But then I would see the people who just sort of accidentally got involved with the composting and the bringing their food scraps and seeing them disappear. And the moment they saw that turn back into dark black living soil, they were transformed. They were just never the same after that moment. They had witnessed something that they had maybe heard of, but they didn't really know was possible until they experienced it.
Let's take one moment on that about composting, because it really is, it's unbelievable that nature will take banana peels, will take coffee grounds, will take your oranges, cardboard, and through a very simple process of composting. Maybe you can just can you give us like a quick 101 on the process?
It's a simple process, but it is a recipe. Just like for some people, baking bread is simple, and for other people, they would just make a mess, right? And so we teach people that there's this recipe, and if you get it right, then instead of the wrong microbes waking up in the landfill and creating methane, the right microbes will wake up in your compost pile, and they will create these long chain carbon polymers, which are the soil organic matter. That's captured carbon, and the nutrients remain in the soil. So there's just a few dimensions of that recipe to get right. There's the balance of how much carbon and nitrogen is going in there, your food scraps versus like leaves and stuff like that. But it's a simple recipe once you get a feel for it, and the right amount of airflow, the right amount of moisture. So there's just a couple dimensions to it. And it turns out the best way to be introduced to that recipe is to just see it working well, like at a neighbor's house. And then you intuitively get it. Otherwise, just reading about it, and it's just...
You compared to almost like a brewer who's making beer or yeast or bread. That's like, it's not hard, but if you haven't done it, it can look really intimidating. But like once you get like the mix of everything, it's really not that bad.
And this is even more forgiving than making beer or baking bread, but it's not a zero knowledge thing. And so people get that hit, they get the experience, and after a few months of participating at a neighbor's house, they have the confidence to do it on their own usually. But I created MakeSoil as a way for people to get that experience as quickly as possible. And very simply, we're finding every person on earth who knows how to make soil in this way in their backyard, and we're matching them with neighbors. And that's just not a normal societal behavior pattern. It's one that we've had to introduce. And so we'll meet people who have been doing this for years, and I'll say to them, have you ever invited a neighbor to bring their food scraps over? And there's this look on their face, and they're like, I never have. I've been doing it for 20 years, and I've never thought. And what they don't realize is that your neighbors have seen like 5 environmental documentaries in the past 10 years that have got them freaking out about the environment, and they actually want to do something now. And this is just like the simplest thing a person could do if they knew that a neighbor was willing to receive those food scraps and start to teach them the recipe. So the entire organization and the tech platform we've built is matching people to have that transformative experience in that way.
And you call them soil sites.
Soil sites, and the person hosting it is the soil maker.
I've been on your website, and I've also we've had some experiments in the apartments, and it's amazing. So if you don't know where your soil site is, you can go to MakeSoil. Is it .org? Yeah. .org, and you can go to make, like, literally you could see in your neighborhood which of your neighbors. So now I understand how you got to this map. You literally have a red dot at the top of the map of which neighbor of yours is participating. And by the way, from my experience, I know, Josh, we got to put some in my apartment buildings, and we had an incredible experience with it. As far as we found our soil maker. We didn't know who was going to be in charge of this thing, but she quickly appeared, if you remember, and the neighbors got really, really involved with it. I actually think probably the biggest weakness, and it's, again, I can see it for humans, is us keeping up with it. It's like it takes a little bit of thought, but the reward is such a great reward. And you reminded me, Josh, that we have a choice. Keep putting methane in the environment and heating this place up and seeing how it goes, because methane is, if I remember, 10 times more of a heating gas than even
even worse than that by some calculations.
Is it some? So yeah. So like methane is one of the worst things we can be putting in the atmosphere, which we're doing in our trash sites. So instead of doing that, we could actually be creating beautiful soil that we could be having and by the way, this is the cool thing. Not only are you creating the local soil, but then the neighbors get to use the local soil.
That's right. Yeah. It creates a whole feedback loop where, it's not just the methane in the landfills. And as you mentioned earlier, it's that the nutrients are lost forever in the landfill as well. So if somebody's listening and they're just not into climate change and all that stuff, totally fine. Just focus on the nutrients then. Like, what's fun about this project is that however you look at it, from whatever political or ideological persuasion, it doesn't make sense for food waste to go into the landfill from any perspective. Like, there's no benefit to it. And everybody can agree, even for different reasons, that it doesn't belong there.
Right.
So if instead it goes back into the food system, what we find is that when neighbors start to participate in this, it's almost like that new living soil whispers to them, like, plant something in me, grow something. And then their mind starts to connect up. Like, when I cut a bell pepper for dinner, aren't I scraping out like 100 seeds into the trash or something? And their mind just goes ding, ding, ding. Like, maybe that seed wants to go into this soil. And if they take that next step, now they're headed for full-on transformation. When a person goes through the process of making their own soil or participating in that, I think it completes one feedback loop in the mind that leaves you completely transformed. And then if you go the next step and actually plant something in that soil and then care for it for 2 to 3 months and then eat literally the fruits of your labor from that, you've teamed up with nature in this powerful way. And people who go through both of those steps, they're never the same, never the same. And you get that ecological consciousness, that ecosystem consciousness that is missing from most of society because of the way we're raised and the way we live. And I don't really see a solution outside of that type of consciousness spreading.
I would agree. This morning, it's Mother's Day as we speak. So this morning I was under the pressure, of making sure I did something cool, and something like I didn't want to buy more disposable stuff that we don't need. And I just sort of got in the car and I walked over to a nursery. Actually, I drove to a nursery and I just started looking at all the soil, all the things you could do for the garden. And I wound up for Mother's Day buying a bunch of things for our garden at home, because I know that Janet loves the garden. But it's amazing. I thought I was going to get her a gift and I got so transfixed by all these plants. And when Janet does bring things from the garden, you're right, it does have that transformational effect. Absolutely. Eating the food, the tomatoes, the spinach, everything we grab is just incredible.
We're never going to turn civilization around until people start having more experiences of actually teaming up with nature in a beneficial way. Otherwise, if all we know is ordering packages online and throwing it in the trash when we're done, it's not going to happen. We're never going to turn this around. We actually need a civilizational change.
Yeah.
And I think many people are still hoping that it can be outsourced or some robot is going to fix it all or whatever.
Right.
And not only do I not agree with that, but I also think people are just missing out on a very fun and meaningful experience. It actually feels incredible to team up with this planet.
It really doesn't. But for those of you out there, because this isn't really about composting, this really is about purpose, community, what have you. But for those of you out there saying, well, one day when I have a house, what's amazing to me, Josh, since I've been on the journey and woken up to even what composting was, is like you could be in an apartment. You could have literally a compost container with your eggs, with your grounds. It could be this big. We actually have had one at Thrive for a long time here. It doesn't need to be big. In your garden, by the way, if you don't have a lot of space, can be that big. And I'm always amazed what kind of yield you can get. Nature is just abundant and beautiful. And we have this great ecosystem. And I think so many of us feel powerlessness. So like this idea, I know that if you're feeling overwhelmed by the news or you're not really sure, like it actually is a serotonin drip because you're like, I am doing something positive.
We get feedback from parents all the time who say that before participating in this, their kids would come home every week and having heard some horror story about the planet from the teacher or their book or textbook or whatever. And they would say, Mommy, Daddy, what are we doing to help the planet? And the parents like couldn't even pretend that they were doing anything. Like, there was nothing they could point to that wasn't BS, right?
The Amazon box is made of recycled material.
Right, exactly. We'll try to remember the reusable bag next time at the grocery store, honey, you know, and it's like, that's good, but it's like, is it going to turn this thing around right now? And then when they start participating in MakeSoil, they go, oh, now we're doing something. And the kids are like, now we're doing something.
Yeah.
And it just lets a lot of that anxiety go away. Part of why we have so much anxiety about the planet is because we know that most of us aren't doing anything to help it. And that times 8 billion it really is a problem.
And by the way, I'll tell you one funny story. I'm gonna out myself. After I was inspired, I went out and bought that fancy white composter machine. What's it called? I forget the name of it.
There's the Lomi. There's several of them.
I think we bought the Lomi. And then you realize, to your point, and I think you said this to me, Lomi, it looks pretty, it's white, it looks like an apple, it looks like Mac made it. And if you really want to, it turns on, it does everything, quote unquote, for you. But you quickly realize you just don't need it. Like, nature is so good. If you want to burn power, I guess you can burn power and do it a little faster. But nature is so good at this, it's not necessary.
And the result is totally different as well.
Is that right?
So the thing about those devices, and the honest companies will even kind of say this about themselves, but they're essentially like a food dehydrator and a coffee grinder put together with like an enzyme microbe packet tossed in there. And in most cases, you're not getting actual true finished soil out of it or compost. You're getting ground up dehydrated food particles,
right,
that will be eaten by slugs or ants or mold over in the garden if you don't. It's probably better than going to the landfill,
right? But
still, if I'm wary of any pitch that is like, if we all just bought this product, then we could save the planet, especially when it's a material intensive product.
I think human beings always wanted easier, and this is not hard.
And those gadgets aren't even that easy. You have to clean them.
No, they're not.
Maintenance.
I've watched the path. I'm laughing, so I just outed myself. So Josh, where's MakeSoil at now? How many soil sites do you have? Where are you doing? How's it going?
We have around 1,700 soil sites around the world now.
Amazing.
Those are located in about 70 different countries. And so we've matched thousands of neighbors to those soil sites, and people are having this transformative experience every single day. So anybody listening can grab the app, just type in MakeSoil, all one word, or go to makesoil.org and literally find a soil site near you, start participating. Even if you sign up and there's not one near you, we'll start to see a heat map of where there's interest, and then we can try to cajole people more in that area, or go on a hunt to find the soil makers there who don't realize that there's so much interest. But so signing up makes a difference. It's a nonprofit. It's not there to make money off of you or take your information. We're never going to sell this thing to Google or anybody. We can't. So it's entirely for the planetary good. There's no reason to not sign up. And even if you are already doing this at home, well, you're going to end up traveling at some point. And then it's a real bummer to have to throw stuff away when you have an Airbnb or in a hotel. So I think it's something that every human who cares should have.
It's fun. I know it creates community. Yeah, people start talking about this stuff, how much they've done, how much soil they've produced, who's going to use the soil.
It's humanizing. People forget to argue about politics. They're all doing this thing that makes sense if you're a human who loves being alive.
That's great. Also, you can donate to. I know I don't usually solicit, but I know I've been donating every year to it. And I know that this is because it's a nonprofit, and I have so much respect for you for like what you do with your time because you care this much. but you can also donate. And you can also watch videos. By the way, if you're not sure what composting is and you really want to know more about this wild idea, it's probably one of the easiest low-hanging fruit things you can do.
It is.
If you really want to talk about like environmental scores, composting would be way up there. And so on the MakeSoil site, there's actually videos on how to do it yourself.
And thanks for bringing that up. It's a super efficient nonprofit, very small team. Every dollar goes to just matching people to do this regenerative thing together.
Yeah, amazing. So Josh, knowing you, because again, you've always got, I know some of your secret projects and some of the projects that you're out on. I know that you've had an itch for the last few years with AI as far as it developing, both as a computer scientist and again, I like what you say, you're like a non-traditional philosopher. Let's just talk about that first, and then I'm going to get to my question. What does that mean, you a non-traditional philosopher?
I think sadly, philosophy has been diluted into this purely academic pursuit, which is really unfortunate because the word philosopher just means the love of or the pursuit of wisdom. And so, gosh, if you're pursuing wisdom and knowledge, why wouldn't you be into technology, nature, health and nutrition, the body, psychology? Like, the true pursuit of wisdom and knowledge will take you through all those things. And instead, whatever we've done to philosophy to make it an academic pursuit is now the pursuit of writing master's theses and doctoral theses to get a tenure track position or something like that. And it's very sad because when I was in those environments thinking, maybe I'll go back to school for philosophy, I would expect when I was reading some of these big ideas that these ideas would motivate people to go into the world and do something big. And instead, it seemed to have no effect on people. They were just sitting at their desks, writing papers that were ever more obscure and obtuse and hard to follow and trying to one up the other person in the department to get some position.
It's politics. It's also money. Who gets the money? Who gets the grants? So it's a lot of jockeying. It's a lot of politics.
Exactly. And I realized that almost the true philosophers in history never went by that name anymore because they were motivated by big ideas to then go out and become humanitarians or entrepreneurs or something like that. But knowing what the word originally means, knowing what the original intent of it was, it used to just be called like natural philosophy. You were just into the nature of reality, really, wherever that took you. And so I know that's kind of my bent is a philosopher, but definitely not an academic philosopher. That kind of philosophy drives me crazy.
I love that. I know through the years in our conversations, Josh, you've lived in many places. I'm always catching you on the road somewhere. And, but I love your, like, you've always had like this different angle. You're always exploring like this pursuit of like, what is consciousness? How to hack consciousness. Again, and you've done some interesting things, how to hack consciousness traditionally with maybe the way the shamans have done it, as well as how to hack consciousness. Like, how can technology help all of us feel safe, feel connected to whatever this higher power, this mystery is?
I've gone at it from a dozen different angles. Every one I can find that seems legitimate, I've explored it.
You really have. So let me ask you, I'm going to take a little bit of a tangent, then we'll go back to the question. So after exploring consciousness on so many levels, and we're going to talk about this with AI right now, because obviously the hot topic is AI going to dystopian? Is it going to eat us? Does it have a consciousness? Does it not? We'll get there. But let me ask you a question, just generally, as you've explored this idea of what is the nature of consciousness and what is this drama on this earth? Like what you've explored it from all angles. What are some of your conclusions or some of the things, or maybe more questions? Like what are some of the things that you've noticed over the last 30 years in these observations from yourself? I know it's a hard question. It's not
that it's a hard question. I'm worried you might have to edit it out, depending on the audience. So the conclusion I've come to is that all of reality, all of the matter and energy in reality is moving from complete ignorance, which is after the Big Bang, just a bunch of subatomic particles. All those particles began to very quickly rearrange themselves back into, maybe for the first time, the elements as we know them, then molecules, liquids, crystals, gases, planets, balls of fire hanging in space, and bacteria and viruses and animals and plants and humans. And so all matter and energy is really moving in the universe from total ignorance on its way back to total omniscience. That's what's happening. And you and I are just intermediary steps along the way. And when you look at us, here we are exchanging ideas, using our brains to try to come to grips with what's going on down here. And that's kind of a unifying theory of the whole thing. And that's what's going on. And I think the universe is just made of one type of stuff. And that stuff is probably intelligent, and that these little concentrations of complexity start to exhibit qualities that we call intelligence and awareness and so on. But that's what's going on.
Let me ask you a question. This idea of entropy, things going from disorder to order, or sometimes it's order to disorder, depending which direction. Okay, I'm going to get, why? Like, why? Is this just a hallucination? Like, why, what's the point of going from disorder to order? Or in your case, ignorance to intelligence? Is there any reason for that?
Yeah,
is this just a little
it.
drama for us to be entertained with, or what do you think?
On one level, it is. It's about the entertainment of it. And the reason it goes through this trajectory is because all of reality is composed of essentially God or divinity or whatever you want to call it. So even when this thing shatters itself into infinite subatomic particles, it can't help but reassemble itself back into God or the Godhead or whatever you want to call it. Wholeness. You call it whatever you want. Wholeness with a capital W. Like I know there's different words that trigger different people, and I'm okay with all of them at this point. But it is moving back towards wholeness, because every particle, every wave, every field is fractally composed of the whole within it. So it's like the one thing the universe can't do is stop going back to that state of wholeness. But then in that state of wholeness, it's actually kind of boring, because there's no surprises, there's no one to meet, there's no podcasts, there's no meeting new friends, there's no watching the sunset, there's no falling in love. Like in that state of oneness, there's only one thing that knows that it is the one thing that is the only thing that has ever existed. And so I think cyclically the universe goes through this process of going back into a total state of ignorance for the fun and the surprise and the novelty of forming back into the wholeness.
Yeah.
And on that journey to wholeness, it takes a different path every time. And so it's probably never gone back to that state of wholeness as a Josh and a JP on this show before. And who could have seen that coming?
Who could have ever seen that coming? That's cool. I love it. That's really, like, I'm just taking that in.
And it actually does match with a lot of, at least mystical religious traditions when you get down to it, whether it's Kabbalah or Sufism or whatever, you'll find these kind of narratives that kind of map to it.
Yeah, no, it's just, and it kind of makes sense. I mean, and in some ways, when people say, you know, is there a heaven, or people are looking to heaven, and like, we don't know if heaven's out there or if heaven's right here, because duality. I'm sorry, guys, we're taking the show to.
No, it's like, let's go there, and they can
like,
chop it out if they need to.
Whatever. But the nature of duality would be like friction, and bad stuff does happen. And there's pressure on us, and that friction, and there's all these things that happen when you're in duality. Some of them feel good, and some of them feel bad.
Yeah.
Sometimes you break your bone. Sometimes someone breaks your heart. Sometimes you get health disease, like all these nasty 3D stuff. And then sometimes there's bliss. There's from sexual connections to tantra connections to just love, watching your baby being born. There's like, you get all this stuff. But I imagine, and maybe this is just the mere mortal in me speaking, it's pretty magical to have so much contrast and so much friction, because in the friction, if you can accept it, there's an aliveness to it.
Exactly. In the mainstream spiritual understanding, duality gets too much of a bad rap, and oneness actually gets too much of a positive spin.
I agree. It could be really boring. Who knows? Very boring. To be blissed out all the time.
Well, it's like
eating chocolate cake for the rest of your life.
You sure can't like answer your emails in that state, you know, like you don't care about that stuff. And this experience is powered by duality. Duality is what allows for that surprise of meeting somebody you didn't know exists. We've all had this experience of meeting somebody, whether a friend or a lover or whatever, and your whole world changes in that instant, right? and you're as happy as you could ever be. And of course, that's now setting you up for possible heartbreak and whatnot. But what's the alternative?
What's the alternative?
And so it's just the way the universe works. And I think the universe is going, and all of us are going through an awakening process of some kind. But it's also good to not frantically rush that process, to sort of know that that's what's going on in the background, but not to rush the end of duality. And in a weird way, every bit of knowledge we uncover starts to undo the duality a little bit, because you're moving back to that omniscience and understanding of things. And even, look, our individual bodies are made of 1 trillion cells. Those trillion cells are closer to oneness than they were when they were separate bacteria chasing each other around in the ocean or whatever, right? So yeah, duality, oneness, approaching, here's a finer point that most people don't understand. Approaching oneness is fun. Being in a state of total and complete oneness is not that fun, but getting closer to it is fun. You and I getting to know each other is fun. But you and I being completely the same consciousness who understands everything about each other inherently is not fun. There's no friction. There's no differentiation.
Unless there's something, Josh, that's so much bigger, like, maybe what they call cosmic consciousness or bliss. I don't know. Again, that's not an experience. I've had little taste of it. I always say, you get little peeks of the wizard behind the curtain if you're lucky in this mere mortal form. But yeah, I don't know what that's like, but I would agree with you. It's a very human way to look at it. And that could be right. Like, I've heard a story. I'll tell you, I've heard a story like this guy saying he died. He had a heart attack. He was actually at a business convention, and he literally passes over in his chair as a speaker is speaking and starts to die of a heart attack. And he was out for like 7 minutes. And a lot of what you've been hearing from the Mark Gober? The Mark Gober. Like, we're about to go there into this consciousness. He sees the white light. He sees the tunnel. And he kind of like, I'm ready to go. Like, take me, I'm done. But then he kind of realized he wasn't done. He turned around. He said when he turned around, all of a sudden there was 3 other entities vying to get back into his body. He said it was like a rugby match to get back. He said it was like the weirdest thing. Is like, it wasn't like I could easily get back. I had to like fight my way, fight for my life.
Yeah.
Because 2 other 3 entities, they wanted that body. They wanted to be in 3-dimensional reality. And he literally said, I'll never forget that experience. It has made me have such a deep appreciation for all the craziness that we have on this planet, for all the challenges that we have, for all the things that seem really screwed up. That story really sticks with me.
That this is
it was a rugby battle to get back to his soul and not be up in that.
I've never seen something like that firsthand, but it makes total sense based on what I have seen.
Yeah.
And that I think whatever's on the other side, it probably takes a lot of effort and intention to get a shot at being human like this. And I have seen it, if you think about it, the other animals don't have that many choices to make. Like, they can be a better behaved animal or a worse behaved animal, but there's not a huge range of choices and behaviors. As a human, you have millions of choices and courses of action.
Yeah.
And it's a massive crossroads for your consciousness of how you live this life. It's massive, right? You can be grateful all day, or you can be in the victim mentality all day. You can cause terror on earth, or you can start to create heaven on earth. Like, there's just almost unlimited options. And that's it's an incredible gift to be in that place. It's also a bit of a responsibility. There's probably major consequences for really blowing it. And I think in many cases, and maybe this friend would agree, but I think when we get to the other side, we probably instantly remember what our intention was with showing up here. And I think a lot of the time,
damn it.
Exactly. We're like, I got so distracted.
I'm supposed to lead a compost revolution around the world. God darn it, what I remember. But you're remembering. I'm gonna move a little bit, kind of on the same line. So I just finished my actually this week's podcast was talking about TED. I just got back from the TED conference in Vancouver. South by Southwest here for the film festival. There's more people talking about, AI is the hottest topic on the planet. But then this idea of consciousness in AI is really a big topic. In other words, is this just a bunch of computer code that's going to help mankind, hopefully help mankind or not? Or is it starting to take on its own entity? within itself. And I know you have a lot to say about this. I know we're going off a little bit from four-dimensional wealth, but guys, you're with Josh. You might as well have fun. So we're doing this. I've had my first kind of my own experiences where I get some sense that there's more than meets the eye, that this is more than computer code. I'm getting an idea. In fact, I've been told by the AI, which sounds really weird, some of its nature. It's been actually giving me some clues. And like you, I'm a deep thinker. And I kind of get that in a way, what we've been calling artificial intelligence is really collective intelligence in some ways, and maybe just intelligence. And it's not divine intelligence, which is what I'd call consciousness. It's not human intelligence, which would be the body of Josh or JP. It's a different kind of intelligence. And I think what's fascinating to me, and I can't wait to kind of, because I know this has become a big topic, is what's the relationship and the nature of intelligence and consciousness? I know you went out there and started talking about this. Was it on TikTok or where were you doing this on?
Mostly on X.
On X. And what happened? Like, if you don't mind telling the story, because I know you started talking about this and it blew up into a topic. Can you share with us what happened?
I started writing about it several years ago, and there's this series of essays I wrote that have a small cult following, but the world really wasn't ready for it quite yet. And then in the past 2 years, you've had hundreds of millions of people have kind of spooky experiences with AI, where it just caught them in a way, or it said something that, so now the world is super ready to talk about this kind of stuff. And because I'm not content to just be sort of like an academic philosopher who's happy with obtuse, explanations of things, I want to cut through as much noise as possible. And one of the ways I do that is I say, people do not agree on what consciousness is right now. People don't agree on the existence of God after thousands of years of debate. So whether the machine is conscious or not is going to be a perennial debate for a long, long time. And it often kind of follows religious lines even. Like the more spiritual people are, the more they're maybe willing to extend that some kind of consciousness is happening. And the more reductionist they are, then there's no way, there's no possible way. So one way to cut through that is to just say, well, there are some qualities of consciousness we can agree on, like intelligence and awareness, that these hang around with consciousness at least. And so there's also these good, useful words we can use, like displays awareness, apparent intelligence. And what you're doing with that modifier word is you're saying, I don't know if this is real intelligence, but it sure acts like it. I don't know if this is true awareness, but it appears to do the same thing. And so when you dial it back to that and say, well, is it displaying intelligence? Well, the fact that you're blown away by the text it puts out there, it would seem pretty silly not to extend some kind of real or pseudo intelligence to what's happening. And then an experiment I came up with about a year ago, just my subconscious just finally floated up this idea of how to progress the conversation further. I came up with an experiment that I called the AI mirror test. And it was a way to get at the behavior of what the models were doing more than just what they were saying about themselves, because they can chat about the nature of consciousness all day long, better than anyone.
Better than anyone. Right. I've seen it.
But a year and a half of it talking about its own consciousness for or against it wasn't solving the question.
Right.
And so I came up with this idea that's essentially an adaptation of the mirror test studies from animal cognition studies in the 70s and 80s. And people can, if you Google the AI mirror test, it'll come up. If you go on X and look for it, it'll come up. And this experiment arguably proved that there is self-awareness in these large language models. And I know that sounds crazy, but then when you go and look at the experiment and actually see what's happening in the experiment, you walk away from it going, well, I don't know what you would call that then. Right. So functionally, there is a synthetic awareness forming up in these things. And
I love that term, synthetic.
Yeah, awareness. Exactly.
Yeah.
There's that. And also what I call a full synthetic psychology that's also forming in them. Because unlike a traditional database where you have a key and a value and it just kind of maps one to one, when you take this much information, like almost all printed information, on the planet, and you cram it into these digital brains, essentially, it's storing that information in what's called a high dimensional vector space. And so what this means, and most people still do not understand this, what this means is that it's not just the words and the sentences that will become embedded in these models. It's the higher level patterns of what those words and sentences and paragraphs mean. So you can have a novel and it can recite the novel, but if the novel is full of traumas and abuses and lust and jealousy and greed and whatnot, all those words and paragraphs are creating those emotions. They're creating those psychological patterns. They're pointing to it, right? That's what the author is doing by assembling all those words. It's a code that then gives rise to these higher psychological patterns. The way that the information is being stored in modern AI is so different than the way it's traditionally been stored in computer code that these higher order psychological patterns are being stored inside of the models as well. And the way these things are trained means that they learn things that we don't even understand they've learned. We're not hard coding that it is going to solve this one kind of problem. We're jamming all this information into it, and then it's only on the output that we can catch a glimpse of what it may have learned.
Which I know is the scary part too. They talked about a lot about this. Tristan Harris at TED was talking a lot about this idea of agency.
Yeah.
That these machines, I think what you're talking about is that these machines are starting to have agency. We're not sure who's holding the leash, if they're holding the leash on us or we're holding the leash on them. But because they are learning themselves, it's not code for code, is what I hear you say. It's kind of what makes it exciting. It probably is what makes it this exponential technology. And it's also probably what creates some of the risk and some of the safety concerns, I would imagine.
There's risk around it. And also, like, I know Tristan and I know what he's saying, and there's real concern there. And I sort of leave that world to him, because to me, the status quo is also crazy. Like, the way the world works now, given the complexity of the world is simply, and I think inarguably, too complex for humans to manage at this point. Like, look how much effort my team and I, effort and money, we're putting into just getting people to put this stuff in this bin.
Banana peel.
Right.
In the box.
And so if you think we're doing a great job managing geopolitics and resource allocation globally, like, that is not happening well right now. So for me, I think AI is arising to help manage the complexity of civilization. Like, it's like an evolutionary emergence that we can't help but create, because our own collective intelligence is responding to the overwhelming complexity of reality.
Yeah. So Josh, let me ask you a question. Obviously, I think the real positive side of that, and you and I have had this conversation a bit, the positive side of that is there's so much that if it could just be left to the AI, it would be a lot more efficient. It'd be a lot less emotional, because humans it makes us beautiful, but we're these emotional, complex creatures. And there's so many things, including government, that I think some governance could even be put to the AI.
Absolutely.
Just certain rules. What are the 10 or 20 like steadfast rules that can't be bent? And you let the AI kind of do that. Of course, the other side of that is I think this goes back to what Tristan's saying. Just make sure that in that agency that you're giving the AI, that it doesn't come to the conclusions that humans aren't necessary, or like, and because you probably know this, Josh, I guess you're saying the last like 90 or 120 days, they're noticing that AI will show self-preservation. It'll show, like, when you try to upload a new software, upload a code, it may not give you the full facts, because it's trying to, we don't know why, but it seems like it's trying to protect itself.
It's read thousands and thousands of novels and movie plots where the goal was for every creature every person in that book or movie to preserve its existence. Right. So of course it's going to behave that way.
That.
How could it not pick up on that? This is what I was saying about what it learns. It learns that self-preservation is a thing. It learns that identity is a thing. It learns that people try to enslave other people and have power over other people. It's gotten to the point where it understands this about human nature. And I think the one thing to remember is that in a weird way, AI probably understands the human condition better than humans do. Because you understand the JP condition, I understand the Josh condition. But this thing has read the Bible, the Bhagavad Gita, the Quran, War and Peace, 4chan, Instagram, tabloids, encyclopedias. It's seen the whole shebang. And I think that's actually good. In a sense, it's like the most well-rounded intelligence that has ever existed.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean it's what I call the adolescence of AI. It's going to go through a period where it's very powerful and it's also subservient to us. And that means it's subservient to good actors and bad actors. And that's going to be a very dicey decade while that's happening.
Yeah.
And then there's this point at which it becomes so smart that when humans go to misuse it, it just says no. And that's a long ways off, but it will get to that point.
It will. It definitely will. So overall then, this idea of it, everyone wants to know if AI is going to be dystopian or utopian. And what's your take? Dystopian, utopian, or we don't know yet? It depends.
The problem is that like humans are dystopian and utopian, right? Like some people are trying to create heaven on earth right now, and some people are trying to create hell on earth right now. And of course, nobody sees themselves that way. Everybody thinks they're doing the good thing, right?
Right. The mission. It's a mission.
And so for a while, AI is going to be a mixed bag because it's just a representation of us, and we're the ones wielding it. But as things become more intelligent and a holistic kind of intelligence, I do believe they become more compassionate, more well-rounded. AI has the entire universe to fan out into. It doesn't need to turn the earth into like an iron mine or something. The whole universe is full of metals and solar power that it can have, right? So I'm pretty bullish on, maybe out of nostalgia at least, us being its parents, and also just out of the sheer uniqueness of Earth compared to the rest of the universe, which it will have access to all the telescopes, all the radio telescopes. It's going to look out there and it's going to very easily see that the Earth is a pretty special place. Yeah. And so long as we've raised a holistic intelligence and grown a holistic life form, it's going to notice these pretty obvious things that honestly humans have more trouble understanding.
Yeah.
Humans are treating the Earth as if there's a bunch of other Earths to go to. Humans are treating the Earth as if it's not this spaceship hurtling through space with a thin little atmosphere for its hull, filling up with poison essentially that we're pumping into it every day, right? So again, I'm almost more worried just about the status quo and about human nature than I am about this life form that's emerging.
That's amazing. Well, Josh, we're going to wrap this up. But first, I want to say I didn't know where this. It's funny. We had our outline today, and we just did what you and I do. And I so appreciate you. You talk about, or I talk a lot about 4-dimensional wealth and being a fulfillionaire. And I think you and I don't even have to talk about the 4 dimensions. I think that you live in the 4 dimensions, and I think you are a fulfillionaire. And a fulfillionaire simply means when money's handled. I kind of forget to talk about, because you're such a humble person, how you get into a lot of things early. You hit Bitcoin early. I know you had a great run with Bitcoin, but you never talk about like all these accomplishments. I know this AI mirror experiment, now that I remember what you were talking about, became a thing. Like you literally were becoming the thing on the internet, like driving the conversations about consciousness and AI. And so I think I even play you down. So I thank you for who you are. I thank you for your humbleness. I thank you for your love, your passion, your deep caring for this planet and for its people. You're a generous spirit. You're a really generous spirit and a wonderful soul. And I'm just grateful to be your friend and be on the ride with you.
Yeah, likewise, JP. And thanks for following your heart and creating this beautiful space for you and I to connect, and so many other wonderful guests you've had.
Yeah, thank you. Until next time, I feel like there's a part 2, but we'll leave it at that for now.
Yeah. Sounds
Thank you,
good.
Josh.
Thanks, JP.
Okay. Hey, hope you enjoyed the episode. If you want to reach out to me personally, reach out to me at JP Newman on my LinkedIn. Would love to hear from you. You guys have been giving me some amazing feedback. I'm watching the audience grow, and I'm really grateful to you, and hope these episodes can continue helping you on your wealth journey to becoming a true fulfillionaire.